So this is another conversation about sort of regional dynamics, this time focusing on Pakistan and its relationship with India and its relationship with Afghanistan and how that sort of connects with the United States. And I say that because I don't think you can understand Pakistan without those three other countries around it. And I'll try to sort of paint that picture very briefly here today. So as I mentioned with the discussion about India, from the start, from partition, from independence, from Great Britain, India and Pakistan had had this rivalry that sort of begins with Kashmir and the dispute over who should control Kashmir, this majority Muslim province that in theory ought to go to Pakistan, but is ruled over by a Hindu prince, Maharaja, who chooses instead to align Kashmir with India, sparking a war between the two countries that leaves the region divided. But from Pakistan's perspective, the dispute, the conflict between the two countries very much favors India, in that India is a much larger country, a much more populous country. And while Pakistan's economy tends to do better than India's economy during much of the Cold War, it's pretty clear that Pakistan is at a disadvantage in going forward. And so Pakistan looks for ways to be more effective at competing with India militarily. And so one of the first things that Pakistan does is it forges a security alliance with the United States, joining up as part of the containment strategy, participating in both CENTO and CETO as a way to link itself to the United States and gain military assistance. Later, Pakistan ends up partnering with China as well as a security partner and a strategic partner. Pakistan has also supported rebel movements, although they would say that they support them in principle and in spirit rather than militarily. It seems fairly clear that Pakistan has had at least some ties and provided some material support to an insurgency that has roiled the Kashmir region, the Indian-controlled Kashmir region, since the early 1990s. And Pakistan has sought both nuclear weapons as a deterrent against attack, as well as this thing called strategic depth. And if you sort of imagine a picture of Pakistan and India, India is sort of a large sort of diamond-shaped country, and then Pakistan sort of a narrow rectangle along the northwestern border of India. And from Pakistan's calculation, if Pakistan invades India, it gets maybe 100, 200 miles in, and India can regroup and then respond and throw back the Pakistani invasion. But if India invades Pakistan, it's conceivable that India could overrun Pakistan in that initial wave just because of the shape of the geography. And so Pakistani military planners start talking about this idea of strategic depth, that Pakistan desperately needs what India has, a place to fall back to should Pakistan be invaded, a place that can be used as a staging ground to regroup and to launch a counteroffensive to retake Pakistani territory. And Pakistan doesn't have that. But what that means is that Pakistan needs to have a friendly Afghan state, its neighbor, that sort of would play that role, that sort of triangular shape that sort of is to the north and west of Pakistan, that Pakistan could essentially control for its own strategic purposes. Pakistan has likewise been very suspicious of the United States and the United States' commitment to Pakistan's security. Pakistan understood the dynamic during the Cold War perhaps much better than the United States. That the United States was interested in containing the Soviet Union and really had very little interest in confronting India. Since the end of the Cold War, Pakistan has known and understood that the United States is courting India, seeking to improve economic ties and cooperation with India, and that has made Pakistan nervous and concerned. And it also is the case that the United States has wanted Pakistan's nuclear arsenal to go away, that Pakistan has perhaps been the most, I'm going to say irresponsible, but I'm going to say irresponsible country when it comes to nuclear proliferation. At the AQ Khan, the scientist who developed Pakistan's nuclear program, was selling pretty much everything that he could sell on international markets to whomever was willing to pay, whether it was Iran or North Korea or Libya, and he was offering round-the-clock customer support for whoever wanted to set up a nuclear weapons program. And the United States has been very critical of Pakistan's nuclear proliferation activities. Additionally, that gap between what the United States wanted out of containment and what Pakistan wanted out of containment, the United States wanting Pakistan to confront the Soviet Union, Pakistan wanting to confront India, was creating a rift by the late 1970s. In 1971, there's an election in Pakistan that ends up bringing Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, in which Zulfikar Ali Bhutto wins, but under disputed circumstances, in which Bangladesh essentially breaks free from Pakistan, and India ends up intervening in a Pakistani civil war between West Pakistan, which we call Pakistan today, and East Pakistan, which we call Bangladesh. And the United States intervenes as well, providing diplomatic and diplomatic support to India and being critical of Pakistan. And Pakistan feels like it really can't trust the United States in its relationship. But by the 1970s, by the 1980s, the US again needs Pakistan in a very concrete way, because the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan. And suddenly US and Pakistani security interests are in alignment, in that the United States wants the Soviet Union out of Afghanistan, and Pakistan wants to be in Afghanistan. It wants to have strategic influence and strategic control over Afghanistan. And so the United States is able to cooperate with Pakistan in helping to train and arm Mujahideen fighters, to help train and arm the warlords that will essentially throw out the Soviet Union and lay a foundation for ongoing Pakistani influence within Afghanistan's politics, initially through manipulation of warlords, and then later through the cultivation of the Taliban, as a way to assert, at least not necessarily control, but at least to have a veto over Afghanistan's future and security. In 1991, the United States cuts off military support to Pakistan. I think at the time it was viewed very cynically, that the United States no longer needed Pakistan because the Afghan war, or the Soviet invasion, was done, and therefore President Bush, responding to a amendment called the Pressler Amendment, which said that every year the US president has to certify that Pakistan is not engaged in nuclear proliferation in order to supply military assistance to Pakistan's. In 1991, President Bush no longer could do that. I believe has come to light since then that it wasn't just sort of the fickleness of US policy, that in 1991, Pakistan was really pushing itself across the nuclear threshold, and doing so with cooperation with China. And so cutting off that military assistance may actually have been for the superficial reasons that were stated at the time. After September 11th, 2001, however, the United States really did need Pakistan again as an ally. The United States had been very critical a few years earlier when Musharraf, the general, had sort of ousted the democratically elected government of Pakistan and inserted himself in control of the country. But after September 11th, the United States very much needed Pakistan, and you get this renewed period of cooperation in which the United States is supplying military assistance to Pakistan. Pakistan is cooperating with the United States in terms of conducting operations in Afghanistan and also conducting operations in Pakistan itself. But Pakistan has also continued to be interested in maintaining influence in Afghanistan. And so those interests of the United States and Pakistan in terms of security have really been diverging in the last decade or so, as the United States has sought to create a stable, democratic Afghanistan, and Pakistan has wanted to retain connections to militant and criminal organizations that would give it influence over Afghanistan.